DW Africa Link.
Experience, they say, is the best teacher. But many argue that when it comes to politicians, that lesson often seems lost. Promises are made, expectations rise, and delivery falls short. So, is this story any different in Ghana? President John Mahama seems to have learned valuable lessons from his first term in office and may be working to correct past mistakes.
So far, I would say I'll rate him like 98%. 98 because Mahama has learned a lot and I can see the progress in town. Everything has changed so far. I used to buy fuel, huge amount of fuel. Yeah. By now, I can say fuel is very low. So far, Africa, our currency is the best now because we are now challenging the dollar so far.
So what is President John Dramani Mahama doing better this time? Where is he still falling short? And what can be improved as he marks 1 year back in office? We'll explore that shortly. Stay with us. I am Achua Tinkrama Domina, and you're welcome to Africa Link, the podcast that connects you to the stories that matter.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama made a historic comeback in the 2024 elections at a time when the country's inflation stood at around 23%. The cedi was weakening, fuel prices were soaring, and the country was under an IMF program. 1 year on, the picture looks different. The currency has strengthened, fuel prices are at record lows, and many Ghanaians are welcoming a sense of economic stability. But the opposition says promises of job creation have not been fulfilled and has branded the flagship 24-hour economy policy a scam. So, how is Ghana really faring under President Mahama? Joining me now for more on this are Dr. John Osai Kwapon. He is a political and development fellow at the Center for Democratic Development, CDD, Ghana. We're also joined by DW correspondent in Accra, Ghana, Eric Mawena Egbeta. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mawena, let me begin with you. What is the general public perception of President Mahama's first year in office, especially if you compare this time to his earlier term?
Well, it's one of commendation. A lot of the individuals we've interacted with have commended the government for their first year in office, particularly the president. Some making the point that he has learned while in opposition over the last 8 years, and the nature in which business has been carried out in the first year of his government has been good. There are some who are a bit on the edge. Yes, they acknowledge that this is above average, but more often than not, if you're very used to the Fourth Republican government, the first year almost always comes off a bit stable. It's the subsequent years, and when their 8-year term is coming to an end is when things begin to really unravel. And so there's quiet optimism from some, but the general sentiment is that it's been an excellent 1 year for a lot of people because the exchange rate has been seen to have done well. There are a number of commodities. In fact, the Ghana Statistical Service, in terms of the food basket and the items which drive inflation, said that a number of them have seen a reduction as well in terms of the prices before from a year ago. And so that seems to be the general sentiment, even though there are some persons who make the argument that, look, I'm still not quite satisfied with what the government has done in the 1 year that they've been in office.
Thank you for giving us that understanding. Dr. Kwapon, for a lot of people who will be listening to this podcast, they may not know why we are giving the background of the first term. Could you draw the differences, the key differences between his first term and what we are seeing now? How stark are we talking about?
If you compare the first presidency of John Mahama to this presidency, the difference is stark, particularly because of, if you think back to 2013, and the fact that for almost about 9 months, there was questions about the legitimacy of his election, right? In the sense that the 2012 election had ended up in the Supreme Court. It was the first time that the Ghana Supreme Court was being asked to adjudicate the outcome of an election. And so there was this cloud hanging over him. Yes, he had already been sworn in, but there was still that cloud of, was he elected? What is going to happen? Should the court overturn the election? All of that uncertainty, which then affected government decisions in terms of how do we begin to even roll out any policies or programs that we have in mind. I recall when I interviewed him for the book that I wrote on his first presidency, he did admit that it made a lot of the investors, donor community a little hesitant because they wanted to wait to see what the election outcome was going to be like as per the Supreme Court. Then shortly thereafter, we ran into an economic crisis, and before we know it, Ghana has to seek a bailout from the IMF, and then came a crippling energy crisis that tripped up his administration, resulting in all kinds of descriptions about his ability to manage the economy and the country, leading then to his historic loss as the first president in the Fourth Republic not to be able to seek re-election. Not to be able to get re-elected for a second term. Now you see the beginning of a second term where on matters of the economy, you see an economy that has not only stabilized from the challenges that led it to seeking an IMF bailout in 2022, but you also see signs of very strong recovery if you look at some of the key indicators that we always judge the health of economy by. And then on the governance side, you see intentional efforts to ensure that this is an administration that doesn't get caught up in issues around conflict of interest, corruption cases, all of that. So one of the first biggest moves, for example, is the code of conduct for public officers that this administration rolled out. So that is, and you can see that they are also trying to set a very different tone in terms of how they engage citizens, how they engage key stakeholders around key issues. So that is where you're starting to see that stark difference between the first presidency and the first year of his second presidency.
Now, when the president was given his speech, during the 1 year Thanksgiving, he said something, and I would like to quote. He said, "Progress is not measured only by numbers, charts, and diagrams, but by hopes restored and trust rebuilt, As a political and a development analyst, do you agree with him on this appreciation of the progress that has been made in the past 1 year? If you do, why?
I do, because sometimes it is, as part of the improvements that any country makes in its development, in its governance architecture, is more than just the numbers we always cite. So trust, for example, is important. Why is trust important? If I am a citizen and I'm feeling certain pinch points, there are certain hopes and aspirations that I want the government to address, I need to have that trust that when my president, when my member of parliament, when all the ministers he has put together to help him govern, I need to trust that when they say we will address this problem, we would. And that is how you continue to keep faith with the people, not only the promises, but also in demonstrating that you are taking active steps to address whatever challenges they're facing. If you look at the work that the Honorable Atuforsen is doing at the Ministry of Finance, it is quiet, but you are also seeing certain positive outcomes that give people a renewed sense that things would get better, a renewed sense that we are on the right path.
Doc, I don't think the opposition will agree with you that it is quiet. The opposition believes the government is doing a lot of running a publicity government. So they are putting a lot of eyeballs on the things they are doing, which are supposed to be usual government, initiatives. For instance, this energy sector debt that was paid. I've read a couple of comments suggesting that this is not something you should celebrate. So if you say the government or the finance minister, for instance, is running a quiet, system, running things in the background, and you're seeing the evidence on the grounds, people may beg to differ.
You're right. But with all due respect, this is also an opposition that when they were in government threw a kinky party to celebrate a government achievement. I mean no disrespect by that. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that if you are going to berate a government for publicizing certain achievements, you have to put it in context and ask yourself, is this something that you would have done or you wouldn't have done? And the evidence is clear that there were things that they would also celebrate. There's something important about governing. And the first thing we learn in public administration is both a science and an art. The science part is the work you do. The art part is where you also engage citizens to ensure that they have a sense that my government is working. So when a government puts out an announcement that has paid off, so much in an energy sector debt, for me, it is part of the art of governing, where you also want to let your citizens see what is being done. Former President Bill Clinton always used to say that the record never speaks for itself, right? That those who govern have to take time out to speak to the record, to speak to things that are being done to address all the challenges that citizens are facing.
Very well. Let me come to what are we seeing in terms of price stability, in terms of dealing with unemployment, in terms of, creation of jobs and improvement. What are we seeing in the country?
For the most part, what it is that we've seen has been macroeconomic stability, indicators pointing in the right direction, and a general sense of a reduction in terms of commodity prices, some commodity prices. And so we talk fuel prices, which have seen quite a reduction. Some taxes have been scrapped. There's been as well duties at the port which have reduced, and all of these and more have come up in terms of, if you go onto social media, when people are making comments, they talk about how they used to pay X amount to buy fuel and they do not pay that any longer. There's that general feel. On conversations surrounding job creation, it's been very much on the quiet. There's been a lot as well done in terms of ongoing construction works and projects where there appears to be a lot of visibility on that score as well. There have been quiet murmurs as to what's happened to the government's much touted 24-hour economic tea. 3 shifts for 3 people, we're working 24 hours and all of that. That's come up very strongly in terms of one of the many things the opposition has criticized the government on. We've had the minority leader raise that a number of times in Parliament. And just over the weekend as well, the opposition held a people's forum where they sought to gauge the sentiment of Ghanaians as to the work done by the current administration. If there's anything we've monitored, and as a journalist who's worked in terms of a number of presidential cycles, when economic indicators are very good, it more often than not covers other aspects of the economy where things might not be so great in terms of how many jobs have been created by this government. For now, a lot of the comments have been around how prices have reduced and people don't buy oil 900 to 800. There's a feeling that as expectation is that the chance of goodwill will begin to wane a bit in the second year of the administration. These matters as to economic numbers will come up. Because mind you, despite the positives, there have been graduates who've been lining up at ministries and asking the question, where are our postings? There have been nurses, there have been teachers, there have been sanitation workers who've been asking the question, where are our postings? You've not posted us just as yet. And because it's been the first year of government, the narrative has been, well, you weren't posted the year before, and we are seeking to stabilize things, and then we will give you the posting. The stabilization we've seen happen until the expectation and the increase in decibels in terms of noise as to what's happening to the jobs. From here on in, we're expecting that will begin a bit more, and then the government will come up under a bit more pressure as to the jobs they promised.
Right. Thank you for that. Doc, Mawina has given us a very balanced understanding or nuance, if you may, of what exactly is happening in terms of the performance and the perception to that performance. Do you get a sense, as Mawina said, that there are certain things that happen generally well, and so it covers up for other things that may be lacking? And do you see that this goodwill may carry on for how long?
Yes. So for a government's goodwill to continue and carry along, it would have to stay focused, it would have to stay consistent, and it would have to keep delivering, especially on the big promises made during the campaign. That is why you would hear references being made to the 24-hour economy, especially by the opposition. And for me, that is a signal to the government that it is one signature policy it promised during the campaign that it must really deliver on. I know that there are things that the government has pointed to, saying that, it stretches beyond the regular economy hours, right? And stretches couldn't go during the night. But there is still the need to roll out that one comprehensive 24-hour economy policy program with all of its different components. I read recently that there's a move to actually also establish a 24-hour economy secretariat. And I think it was from the BOG governor, that it is something that would be done this year. So again, you really want to make sure that if you want the people to still keep faith with your government, you have to keep delivering. And for me, the 24-hour economy was such a signature policy that sooner rather than later, it is one of those things the government needs to fully roll out.
Let's talk about democracy now. Your center is big on democracy, and to a large extent, the book you wrote is also focused on democracy. Give us a brief understanding of how Ghana has fared democratically under John Mahama's first year.
We continue to have generally peaceful turnovers where there's the loser's consent, as well as the winner being gracious in their victory in terms of, look, this is about Ghana, this is about Ghana's democracy. So keeping that stability going through peaceful turnovers is a solid credential to not just the president, but both to the contestants in the previous election, but also to the efforts that Ghana is making to ensure that in a time where West Africa is facing challenges with its democracy, we continue to sort of stay the course and maintain our democratic development. For me, the biggest thing is the efforts being made around constitutional reform. I know that the Fourth Republican Constitution has served us well to a large extent. It has ensured a stable, uninterrupted democratic practice for 30 plus years. But we've also over time pointed out that there are certain challenges and issues with the Constitution. And so for me, his appointment of the CRC to look into it, bring him recommendations, and then looking at what the next steps will be after these recommendations have been received, I believe are things that augur well for the efforts that his government wants to make in conjunction with key stakeholders and the Ghanaians in general in strengthening Ghana's democratic practice.
Right. Do you agree with the committee that the presidential term limit should be extended to 5 years?
That I don't agree with. I don't agree with because I don't believe that time is necessarily the factor that inhibits progress and development when we elect presidents, right? Because we've seen leaders, not just in Ghana, but throughout the region, having stayed in office for years without any remarkable improvements in development outcomes.
Right.
And so I don't believe that time is what our presidents need. So that's where my disagreement with that recommendation comes from. I mean, if you efficiently use your time, do your 4 years, and if you do a good job, Ghanaians would give you another 4 years.
Unfortunately for him, he doesn't have another 4 years. But let's wrap up with the both of you now. Mawina and then Dr. Kwapong, in the next 1 year ahead of us, what are you anticipating Ghana would look like? Any of you can take it first.
Well, I just hope that the government will continue to stay focused. The government will continue to prioritize the key things that it wants to work on. And I just hope that the recovery would continue and that would even get on a path of stronger recovery. Because again, if Ghana works, if the economy works, it works for all of us.
Yeah, I think I'll take it from where Doc left, because as much as we speak as journalists and analysts, we're all Ghanaians, and it's everybody's fervent hope that things work out. Cautious optimism that things will stay in track. The president has promised the country is not going back to the IMF. We've heard this a number of times before. So we're just hoping that things can stay on track in terms of economic management and the respective policies. And then all of our politics is reduced to deliverables and less of the opposition wishing for things to go on a downturn so they can come back like we saw in 2024. Things stay positive, and then it's a contest of ideas and who can best develop this country.
Things staying positive. Thank you very much, Mawina Egbeta. He is CW correspondent in Accra, Ghana. You also heard Dr. John Osai Kwapong. He is a political and development specialist or fellow with the Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana. Thank you both for your time.
Thank you as well.
Africa is changing. Don't get left behind. Tune in to Africa Link.
So how do Ghanaians assess President John Mahama's first year back in office?
So far, I would say I'll rate him like 98%. 98 because Mahama has learnt a lot, and I can see the progress in town. Everything has changed so far. I used to buy fuel, huge amount of fuel. Yeah. By now, I can say fuel is very low. So far, Africa, our currency is the best now, because we are now challenging the dollar so far.
He has achieved a lot, especially we witnessed the removal of the e-levy, the beds tax, the emission levy and all. So these are great and strides in the country. I think many people will attest to the fact that there have been some kind of relief in their lives.
For me, I wouldn't say it's excellent, but it's still early days, so I'll put him at very good, given the fact that most of the things being kept in proper place. There are steps taken to rectify certain aspects, especially matters of the exchange rates. We look at issues of education, all those things. Much particular attentions have been given to those aspects of within our system.
I would say that so far so good. I would say he has really done well. And kudos to President Mahama and his team, especially his economic team. They've really done well. You know, during the swearing in of the president, he gave out some 4 pointers that we can use to measure his performance at the end of the year. And so based on these pointers, he made mention of economic restoration and stabilization. And he made also mention of improving the business and investment environment, governance and constitutional reforms, accountability, and the fight against corruption. So taking these 4 pointers into consideration, I would say he has really walked the talk.
For many economic analysts, one of the most visible outcomes of President Mahama's first year is the impact on everyday life. Business confidence is also high. The question now is, will Ghana be able to protect these gains in the years ahead? Share your thoughts with us on Facebook at DW Africa. Listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast, and subscribe to DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This show was co-produced by Eddie Micah Jr. I am Ajua Tinkrama Domina. Many thanks for listening.